Okay, here we go. So, I'm going to begin actually by telling you, we're taking kind of a macro view, or as one of our pastors likes to say, a 35,000 foot level on the whole Gospel of John. So, we're going to start there. And then we'll move into the story of the wedding at Cana, the book. So John is divided into essentially two parts, two big parts. The first part is called the Book of Signs. And that encompasses chapters 1 through 12. Bless you. A little bit more than half of the Gospel of John, 21 chapters in the Gospel of John. So in the book of signs, John records the events or the public signs that convey Jesus' identity. Who is this guy, right? That's the question that John is answering. And so everything that he writes, these are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name. Everything he writes to show us who Jesus is. Namely, that Jesus is the Messiah. The Son of God. And so these signs are pointing us to the truth that Jesus is Messiah. He is Messiah. So in the book of signs, Jesus reveals his glory. And it's something in stages, right? I mean, you've got at the beginning of the book of signs, at the beginning of the Gospel of John, in John 2, he's turning water into wine. What? Right? But in John 11, he's going to raise a guy from the dead. Oh, that wine thing was cool at the time, but wow, really? And so this revealing of who he is takes place during the course of John 1 through John 12. And so in the book of signs, Jesus reveals his glory. The second part of the Gospel of John, which is chapters 13 through 21, is the book of glory. And the book of glory, as the name would suggest, focuses on his glorification via the cross and the empty tomb. And in the book of glory, Jesus receives glory from God. So, and this is based on John 1:5, where John writes, the light, meaning Jesus, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So Jesus is the light. This is kind of, John 1 and John 1:5 in particular is kind of a microcosm of John's Gospel, kind of like in mini form, John's Gospel. The book of signs, chapters 1 through 12, describes how the light shines in the darkness, how Jesus shines in a dark world. And the book of glory tells us how that darkness attempts but fails to overcome the light, to overcome Jesus. Truer words were never said, and it's this simple. Jesus wins. It didn't look that way to the disciples for a few days between Friday and Sunday, but Jesus, as dark as our world gets, as much as Satan has wrought havoc on this planet, he doesn't win. So those are kind of that's kind of the overview of John's gospel. So here in John 2, then we're seeing his first sign in the book of signs, because John calls the miracle at Cana the first sign of Jesus. It's believed that this portion of John's gospel is recounting the very beginning of Jesus' public ministry. Now, as I said, it was possibly not his first miracle, but it was certainly the first miracle of his recorded ministry of what has been recorded about his public ministry. In other words, the story of the wedding at Cana takes place chronologically before any of the ministry recorded in the Synoptic Gospels. So this is earlier. This takes place earlier than anything in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Okay, good. So let's start then with the wedding at Cana, and we'll begin with the problem, and it's a big problem. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." So this is a big problem. In fact, I think as I mentioned when I was doing the lecture from the curriculum, that it could have led to a lawsuit. The family could have been sued for not providing enough for their guests. Now that may seem odd, but some woman won millions of dollars because she didn't think that hot coffee should be hot, right? So we have some pretty frivolous lawsuits today as well. But it could have led to a lawsuit. At very least, it would have brought shame on the couple and their families. In a shame culture, which is Eastern religions, or not religions, Eastern people groups tend to have what's called a shame culture, which means that the worst thing that you can possibly do is bring shame on your family. And to do something wrong, to do something that is illegal or anything like that, brings shame on the family. I forgot that I was going to show you a little something. But before I show it to you, because to bring shame on your family, to bring shame to yourself. So if you, let's say you skip school, you get in trouble, you have a detention, whatever it is, who does that bring shame on, or who is responsible for having done that? Yeah, I am, right? You are, right? And nobody would say, well, that family, right?
I mean,
Something's wrong with that family. Some people would. Some people would, but mostly in our culture, we believe in personal responsibility, right? You are responsible for your own behavior once you reach a certain age. When you're 2 and you put a knife in the light socket, that's that is not, that's not on your parents, but or not on your family. But generally speaking, we believe in personal liability, not a whole family being to blame. And in many cultures, including in ancient Eastern cultures like Jesus lived in, that was true. So yeah, in a shame culture, by the way, if I would have left that in there, YouTube would have flagged it. So that's why. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just watch Mulan and you'll get it.
We can show the link.
We gotta keep going. Mary may have, I mentioned this in the other lecture, Mary may have had some official part in the wedding, some official capacity, and that's possible, right? Or perhaps it was a family member's wedding, a nephew or something like that, or perhaps she just liked to stick her nose into other people's business and where it didn't belong. I can relate to that. Either way, she seems pretty upset about this. The way I read it, she's more, "Help! The wine ran out," than, "Hey, did you hear those poor folks ran out of wine?" Right? I think she's really upset about this, and so in her panic, she turns to Jesus. Would that we all would do that when we're facing a difficult situation. But she turns to Jesus, and Jesus' response is interesting, at very least, right? It's a very formal response. It would be like if you walked up to your mother and said, ma'am, may I have a sandwich? No, I don't even. Now, I also grew up in a military family, so yes, ma'am, and yes, sir were pretty common, right? And I said yes, ma'am, and yes, sir to my teachers. Mostly my parents didn't have me say that at home, but at times I certainly did. But it's a formal response, and it's, as we've already talked about, a mild rebuke. And a rebuke, however mild it is not what we would expect. So why? Why would Jesus rebuke his own mother? The need is real, right? And so why wouldn't he expect her to come ask his help? Why wouldn't he immediately say, "Oh yeah, I need to take care of this"? Now, Mary was probably, and this is my opinion here. So people can disagree with this, and obviously your curriculum disagreed with it. But Mary was, in my opinion, Mary was probably not expecting a miracle. But she is, in some sense, presuming upon her relationship with her son. And that's important. She was probably a widow by this time, and she found it easy when he was at home to depend on him. That's easy to do with an eldest child, and I understand. But, and this is the most important thing, Jesus is redefining their relationship because he is no longer under her authority. I get this. When Josh first decided to become a cop, Douglas County sheriff, he asked if he and his wife, I don't think he brought the kids, could come over to our house one Sunday afternoon. He said, "Yeah, sure, bring the kids." "No, we're not bringing the kids." "We're not bringing the kids." By the way, they came over last night. We had a fabulous time. And he came to ask my permission, or maybe not my permission, that's too strong a word. He came to ask me my feelings about him choosing this. Now, I had a whole lot of feelings running through my brain at this point, right? And I knew two things. The first thing I knew is that this is what God created Joshua. This is who he is. It's who he has always been. When I would take the kids to a playland, Josh would not play in the playland. He would wait for a kid to get stuck at the top of the slide, and he would go up there and rescue that kid. And I've told you already, he was Destructo Boy, right? I mean, he was just this active boy. So I knew that. The other thing I knew is he wasn't under my authority anymore. I didn't need to give him on that. And I certainly didn't need to tell him my real thoughts and have him go into a career thinking mommy doesn't want him to do this, right? So I said, I want to know how your wife feels. And she was all for it. He was no longer under my authority. He's a grown man. He doesn't need my opinion. And so I understand that. And I think that actually did redefine our relationship. And here, Jesus, rather than giving into his, capitulating might be a better word, to his, that'd be a good word of the week, and you could use it, I'm sure. Capitulate. Okay, in about a month.
How do you spell that?
The word of the week, okay? C-A, pit, U-L-A-T-E. So yeah, he's no longer under her authority. So Jesus had to, in a sense, put a wall between them. He could no longer take orders from her or from anyone else, for that matter. He has his own agenda, and his only concern is to do the will of God, his Father. That is his only focus, is to do what God has sent him to earth to do. And here's why he had to do this. because Mary, like every other person on earth, had to come to Jesus as her Savior, not her little boy or her son. Can you even imagine how hard this was on Mary? No, you can't. Someday, ladies, I hope that you will be able to understand that. I know how difficult it has been to let go of Josh and Lane. They're grown men now. They're not my little boys anymore. But this would have been infinitely more difficult than that. And so Jesus says, why do you involve me? Literally, as we've talked about, he says, what to me and to you, which was a Hebraic idiom, meaning a kind of a Hebraic saying. That means generally, how does this concern us both? Or what do we have in common here? So Jesus is declaring here at the very beginning of his ministry that he is completely free from any kind of human advice, agenda, or manipulation. And then after he says, woman, ma'am, what does this have to do with me? He says, my time has not yet come, or more literally, my hour has not yet come. And I've already told you in the Greek, that word is hora. My hour has not yet come. So let's talk, we've already talked about this a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more deeply about what this means. In the Gospel of John, and we're going to see this phrase again. In the Gospel of John, this is an important word in the Gospel of John, by the way, but in John, it refers to the hour of Jesus' glorification. In other words, it refers to his death on the cross. To a certain degree, also his resurrection, but it mostly refers to his death on the cross. So this phrase spoken here is in literary terms a prolepsis. Anybody know what a prolepsis is? I didn't either until I read it. So it's a reference to a theme that will be developed later. So now when you're reading novels, you'll see things where there's this sort of foreshadowing almost. So this is a reference to a theme. Now, Jesus actually said those words. But in the Gospel of John, it will unfold as John's Gospel unfolds. So Jesus is likely, by saying that my hour has not yet come, is picking up on the symbolism of wine. And particularly the symbolism of wine in the Old Testament. And he's saying that the time for him to provide abundant wine has not yet arrived. Now, how is that a prolepsis? That is part of the Old Testament picture of Messiah. Messiah would come, Messiah would make everything right, and Messiah would bring this banquet that was overflowing with food and wine. And so it was believed that that's what Messiah would do. And so Jesus is saying that time has not arrived yet. Now he's not refusing to act, quite obviously. And obviously Mary didn't interpret it that way because she turns to the servants. The next thing she says is do whatever he tells you to do. So Jesus may be saying, by saying my hour has not yet come, he may also be saying that he will act even though his time has not yet come. His hour has not yet come. His time to be glorified has not yet come. But the time to begin his ministry has. And I think that's what he's saying. Now, Mary probably didn't really understand all of that, which is another common theme in John, misunderstanding. We'll see over and over and over again in John. In fact, look at John 12. I think I have this up here. Now, among those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks. That just means Gentiles, non-Jews. not necessarily from Greece. So these came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and asked him, "Sir, we wish to see Jesus." Philip went to Andrew. Philip went and told Andrew. Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus, and Jesus answered them, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." Interesting, right? Some multiple, we don't know how many, Gentiles want to meet Jesus, want to talk to Jesus. And I don't know why Philip didn't think he could go on his own, but he gets his brother Andrew, and they go to Jesus. And instead of Jesus saying, "Hey, okay, great, let him in," or "No, send them away," he says, "The hour's come." So we will, between John 2 and John 12, we'll hear this term over and over again. And what Jesus is saying here is, my death is near. He probably also talked to the Greeks, but that was the first thing out of his mouth. Yeah.
Were the disciples like, "Oh no, this is going to happen now," or like, did they just?
Over and over again. Woo! And at one point he says, to Philip, "Have you been with me so long and still you don't know me, Philip?" Right? So yeah, no, they're going to be pretty clueless until the resurrection. Then they get it. So then let's talk about the solution to this problem. This is the first sign, sorry, that of the signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples. Wow, why do I have this? That's interesting. Okay, I guess I'm reading this little by little. So here's the sign. And so it's the first sign of his ministry. So the word John uses for sign is intentional. He could have used a word meaning miracle or mighty work, but he chose sign. And in the Greek, I don't know, this is something like semeion, something along those lines. And he chose sign because a sign is more than a display of supernatural power. It is a new revelation of God. It's when God is telling us something completely new, like sending Jesus to the earth, something completely new. And so it's a new revelation of God. In other words, God is revealing something. And so this is his first sign. And like a sign, this miracle was pointing to something. If you were here and someone said, "How do I get to I-80?" And you gave them directions, and they go down here and they turn left on Chandler Road, and they don't see the sign that says I-80 this way, right? They're going to end up in South Omaha somewhere, right, before they realize, I think I did something wrong, right? That sign is pointing, saying, if you want to get there, you need to go this way. And so this is a sign pointing to something else, pointing to a way, pointing to the way. So the miracle at Cana is a sign pointing to Jesus' identity. Who is this God? He's Jesus. He's the Messiah. And this happens at a wedding banquet. That is also intentional. Because there's this Old Testament picture of Messiah providing a banquet for all of humanity, all who know God. And at that banquet, there is abundant provision, especially of wine. That time, that hora has not yet come. But this miracle is a sign that it is coming. And Jesus used the picture of a wedding banquet in his parables frequently. He referred to himself as the bridegroom and to the church as his bride. Paul used that same language. What a perfect place to announce, to reveal the arrival of Messiah at a wedding banquet. But there's more. Something new is being revealed in this story. The purification rituals are being replaced. No longer will purification with water be needed. That's what the jars symbolize. Those jars that were for purification, not to wash your hands, but as a ritual before eating. Those jars didn't provide purification at all. Jesus will provide purification with his death on the cross when the hour before arrives. But wait, there's more. There's replacement here, not just of the purification rites, but a replacement of an entire system. Jesus didn't just provide wine. Jesus is the new wine. Verse 22, Mark 2. Now, John's disciples, you know what? I think we're okay. John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and people came to him and said, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. And the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine in old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is destroyed, and so are the skins. But new wine is for fresh wineskins." Jesus is talking about his own ministry, about why he came to earth in these passages. And in and through Jesus, the entire system of how a sinful people connect with a holy God will be replaced. I'm going to read to you from one of my very favorite scholars, and then we'll stop here. The story of Cana, therefore, is far more than a story about a wedding and some wine. It is a story that carries remarkable symbolism for Jews and their Messiah. Moreover, it is a story that makes sweeping commentary on the world into which Jesus is coming. "They had no wine" is not simply a comment by Mary about the panic of the West Coast. It is a theological statement about the Judaism that is now meeting its Messiah in his very first year. We only have a little bit left to go. Actually, this is all of it. So I think we'll just go ahead and just be a little later in class. So in this miracle, the glory of Jesus meets the purpose of John. And I'm going to read these two verses to you. The first of his signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, showed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. And then we see at the end of John, this story was written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. John 2:11 is the sign reveals Jesus' glory, and John 20 John tells us that this story was recorded so that we too might put our faith in Christ. Now we're done.
Mrs. Cana,